flowers on the stage.
My brother took me to my first show, which was Ted Nugent at Meriwether Post Pavilion. He came swinging out of the vine, didn't quite know what to think of that. Wasn't quite my style, but I went along for the ride. But I'd say really my first taste of music was the Grateful Dead. I went to a couple shows before that, but my I was at college at James Madison University. My friends woke me up one Saturday morning and they're like, "Hey, dude, we're going to the Cap Center. You want to go?" And I'm like, to see the Grateful Dead? I don't know about the Grateful Dead. It seemed like a country rock band, not really my thing. But I'll go just for fun. So we went up there, and I guess the story kind of starts where it starts for a lot of people. Put a piece of square paper on your mouth, go to the show, rock and roll, check it out, melt into a dream, and that's where it all started pretty much. Turned out to be
Would
my favorite band then, and it's been my favorite band ever since.
would young Tim have ever thought that that would put you down a path like this?
Definitely not. I thought I was just partying and hanging out with my friends and doing what I do in college and experimenting and getting to know the scene, that kind of stuff. I had no idea I would ever put on a show, let alone a couple thousand of them at this point.
Yeah, and shout out to that. Zooming out, you
Sure.
know, right now, with Bob, Bill, and Donna passing on, it feels like a turning point in the Grateful Dead scene, and rest in peace to Bob, Bill, and Donna. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Like, what kind of feels different from your point of view right now that most people wouldn't notice unless they're kind of deep in the scene?
Well, I mean, I think people notice, but I don't think they necessarily know what it is. I mean, I think people put their finger on it. Like, as far as I'm concerned, when Bobby passed, it was a finality. It's like the Grateful Dead or any iteration thereof, has passed. I mean, Mickey and Billy are still around, but they don't really present themselves in that way. And um, it's kind of it's the end of a just monumental era and the beginning of a new. And the beginning of the new is what we're trying to figure out right now, I think. The beautiful thing for Dark Star is that they are doing exactly what they did. And they started in 1997. They've played over 3,300 shows. They play the music of the Grateful Dead, probably the second best of any Grateful Dead band in the world, just behind the Grateful Dead themselves. And they put it out there. They put it out the way it was played, the instruments it was played, the staging setup it was played. The soundboard is the same one that the Grateful Dead used. It's like they're not trying to mimic them as much as they're trying to. They provide a service. They bring this music to the fans. The fans that saw the Grateful Dead get to see the Grateful Dead in the way that it was presented, the music, the sound of music, the vibration of music, the people, the audience. It's just like it feels like a Grateful Dead show when you go to a Dark Star Orchestra show, and it's just magic. And people that have seen the Grateful Dead before are being enjoying that service that Dark Star is providing, and then they're bringing their kids. There's 18, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. All these kids of all different ages are checking out the Grateful Dead music for the first time. When they check it out with Dark Star Orchestra, they're getting the closest thing that they can get to the real thing. And the beautiful thing for Dark Star is they don't have to change anything. Like they're just, the day after Bobby passes, they're going to play the same way they did the day before, and just going to keep playing the music to the truest that they can.
Mm. And yeah, with you being so close to Dark Star, what do you think it is that they do with their approach, with their structure, that creates loyalty instead of just nostalgia around the band?
Well, they were all Grateful Dead heads themselves, so they went to a lot of Grateful Dead shows. They know what it felt like to be on that parking lot, to be in that venue, to enjoy that music, and to be a Dead fan, and to be, just to be one with the surroundings of what they were seeing, and they step on stage and they know that they're providing this music to a fan base that loves this music, and they just want to provide it the best way that it can. Um, with as much heart as they put into it. It's just like they're 100% into it. Like this is their lives. This is what they do. And they're not trying to play note for note or anything like that. They're basically taking an era. They know how each individual member played it in that era, and they come out and they, I guess reformat or reproduce what's been done in the past by doing it. In some ways, it's original. Like I've never considered them a cover band. I mean, they're obviously a cover band, a tribute band, but like they're so unique in the way they cover the Grateful Dead. They're almost an original Grateful Dead band. You know, they're so knowledgeable about what the Grateful Dead was and how they played their music and where they went in different segues and how they're just um, they still amaze me to this day. Like I don't understand how they can keep playing better, year after year, set after set, tour after tour. They just keep they've been playing together. We had new members join us in the last 15 years, but it's been, I think it's been 2015 since Skip joined us. So it's been 12 years since the last member joined us. And Barack, it was like 2012, and Matson, shoot, I'm not exactly sure, right, somewhere around that time too. But like, they've been, since 2015, they've been fine tuning this group of musicians on stage and just, really taking it to the next level.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
So Tim, jumping to the side, I want to, talk about you and your background a little bit aside from the Dead. I'd love to hear a time, with all good and everything you've done. I mean, I'm sure there's unimaginable, unsolvable problems that have come across your desk, and you just have to kind of pick the best of the solutions or, you know, creative problem solving. I'd love to hear from you like a story of a time where you had to kind of make a call that you knew people would maybe disagree with, or you knew there's no real perfect solution. Just kind of give us a glimpse into your world with some of the tough calls you have to make.
Wow. That takes me way back. Um, I mean, what first came to mind when you asked that question was, you know, how do you get 21,000 people up on top of Marvin's Mountaintop through a one-lane country road? That was a problem, but it wasn't that problem because it started at like 5,000 people. How to get 5,000 people off a one-lane country road? And it's like you you know you build brick by brick. You figure out how to do it that year. You regroup. You know, Mars Mountaintop was really the pinnacle of my career as far as the 8 years that we did All Good Festival up there, and it was an amazing experience. And people talk about to this day just being the most memorable moments of their music listening career and stuff. And um, I mean, it was really a team. I mean, we went from a team of 50 to a team of like, including 400 volunteers and 400 security guys. We had like 1,250 people on staff in 2011. And, you know, we were able to get 21,000 people up this one lane road in a matter of 2 days to get them up there. It seems like the fans, they pissed them out about a little bit, but, they didn't mind waiting in line for 4 to 6 hours to get up to the site because it just took that long. But it's the kind of thing where you're like you're going up this one, like I said, this one single lane country road, and you're like, where the hell are we going? And you're just winding up, and you're waiting and waiting, and then you get up there, and it's just like this oasis on top of the mountain, and it's like you've gotten home kind of thing. I don't think I answered your question, but that's the first thing that came to mind when you posed that question, Emily.
Yeah, but you did kind of allude to it, like getting 2,100 people, 21,000 people, right?
Uh,
21,000 up a one lane country road. It's got to be quite the lineup to have them want to sit in those lines.
yeah. Well, it was a jam, but it was a different scene back then. It's like the, I was doing 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 18, 21,000 people in my climb. Gathering the Vibes was doing, similar climbing to what they were doing. And there was summer camp, they were doing the numbers back there in the 2000s as well. Like, so these camp out festivals were doing 12 to 20,000 people. And but there was like 4 or 5 of us. There wasn't 500, festivals to compete with all over the place. Like
Yeah.
literally, it was, Bonnaroo's, summer camp, Gathering the Vibes, All Good Festival, Walkers. Like I remember it's like 5 jam band festivals for the whole summer around the country.
Yeah. And those festivals, I mean, it's honestly rough talking about it. Like those are
Yeah,
those days. Like what has happened? I mean, it's so hard for bands to get recognition now, up and coming bands without those festivals. And you just got a few headliners touring the country and then a bunch of smaller bands kind of competing over the scraps. It's like maybe you can comment on that. Like what direction do you see things going now?
well, I've done like, I think I'm on 72, 73, and 74 festivals. These next three coming up
Hmm.
since 1996. I did my first one. Um, but I saw the campground, camp out festival started to die on me with All Good Festival as well. Like come 13, 14, 15, I went from like 20,000 people down to about 13,000 people. And it wasn't necessarily due to, it had something to do with I changed venues, but um, all the camp out festivals are declining. So we all found ourselves in the same boat. Like, people aren't coming out like they used to. It's like there's more events going on. There's I don't know if Fish was drawing more people, and that was taking some of the some of the oxygen out of the room. But for whatever reason, over time, the jam band camp out festival went away, and or not hasn't gone completely away. Like Dark Star Orchestra, Dark Star Jubilee is actually at 4,000, 4,500 people we expect this year will end up being one of the biggest jam band campouts in the country, which is absurd. But that's kind of where it's at. And when All Good Festival came and went and was done in 2015, I basically wrote it off and said, okay, it is what it is. I'm moving on with my life. I'm going to do this and do that. And the next thing I did was a 48/48 festival. Because it wasn't as much of a risk. It was a resort where people would get hotel rooms and condos and that kind of stuff. And I feel like that's partially where this whole thing is going. Like people, they do these events outside the country. They go to Jamaica, they go to Mexico, they do these destination events. And that got me thinking about Snowshoe Mountain Resort as far as a destination event for 48/48. And at some point I just kind of stumbled upon Meriwether Post in Columbia, Maryland as being, it's right here in my backyard. I mean, the first show I went to was Meriwether Post with Ted Nugent when I was 16. My mom lives 2 miles from Meriwether Post right now, and I live about 30. So it's like this has been my home this whole time. And Meriwether sitting around my backyard, and never did I think I would do All Good Festival there. But it just started to make sense, with a band like Goose was emerging and J-Rat doing the business they were doing, the string cheese, like, you know, the concept was that people, you know, I think people were they're less prone to like go drive 5 hours to go sleep on the ground for 3 days to do a camp out festival, but they might be prone to drive from Richmond for 2 hours and get a hotel room in Columbia, Maryland, and go to Ogden now and go back to the room and go back to Ogden now. Like it's just that mentality, that livelihood is it's just changed. So that was my concept of going with Ogden now was a transition from the camp out um, to a shed show, but in a festival sense. We have two stages there, so we can go back and forth, no overlapping sets. We get a lot of bands to play throughout the day. Work with Meriwether is very straightforward. They're all pro. They're IMP. They know what they're doing. They do the anthem, do 930 Club. They act as really good partners. They treat people. It's all about treating people the way they should be treated from the time you send them a newsletter saying, hey, we're going to do this festival, to what you say in the newsletter, to how you treat them, to how you treat them when they buy a ticket, to how you treat them when they show up. I feel like you gotta, um, I feel like what I do is I set the stage for the bands and I set the stage for the fans, and then the bands and the fans take it from there. Once I get them there and the bands are happy and the fans are happy, that's when the magic happens. That's when the energy starts to rise. And, you know, I feel like, not to tout my events, but I feel like my events have some of the best energy of any events you're ever going to go to. And it's because of the way that we treat each person and, create the community atmosphere and make people feel like they're at home with the music. And that's what we do. That's what it's all
Mm.
about.
I'm sure if you're out there listening, like anyone out there listening has probably been to an event where that golden rule didn't apply. Like whoever was the brains behind the event didn't put themselves into the fans' shoes.
Right.
And you know, some events are better than others. And yeah, everyone out there listening, we got a link in the description too. All Good Now Festival coming up June 13th and 14th that Tim was mentioning at Meriwether Post Pavilion in Columbia, Maryland, featuring Widespread Panic, Green Sky Bluegrass, Les Claypool doing Claypool Gold, Dark Star Orchestra, way more. So yeah, everyone out there listening, pause this. You got a link in the description for you to check out that event and get your tickets now. Um, yeah, Tim, would love to hear as we're talking about this, like something you think maybe newer fans in the jam world may kind of overlook or not really fully understand about the scene, since they're kind of newer fans just getting into it right now.
I think kind of what we are just talking about as far as like, the family and the community is like, I think the younger generation, if they haven't, when you went to those campouts, you got to know people, you got to know how people acted within this environment. And you got to hang out with them. You don't really get that setting. So let's say you get a Married with a Post and it's a 1 day show, and it's one band, and you're going there to see the show. You're kind of like you're going to your seat. You're not necessarily interacting with other people. You're seeing the show and you're going home. Like that person that's doing that uh, hasn't had that feeling before. When you go to All Good Now, Married with a Post, you show up and it's like your seats are your neighbors. It's like it's like your neighbor on the street. It's like everybody's one. That's the whole concept is when the music and the fans are all communicating as one, that's when the event's been successful. Don't know if I answered your question, but
You kind of did though. Like it
yeah,
is such a different social vibe, whether you're camping for a weekend with a crew, meeting other camping groups. You know, you become friends with all your neighbors versus ticketed show where you're just kind of going with the people there. But then in that building, you know, the energy does kind of become all one. A lot
sure,
more like
absolutely.
Fish at Madison Square Garden or something like that.
Right. Well, it's about the experience. The people that the events that people remember mostly are the ones that fall apart. The big thunderstorm rolls through and the stage gets washed out and this band can't play and this band got stuck in the mud. And it's just like those are the memories that people have now from the festivals in the past are those kind of memories. So
I'd love to hear you talk about, Tim, how you feel like putting on these massive events, all the logistics that goes on with it, all of the people relying on you to keep your cool and to drive a tight ship. Like, how do you feel like that's shaped you as a person?
um well, like people ask me all the time, like how am I so calm when these events are going on? It's preparation. It's like I'm in uh my favorite place to be is on festival site. Like when I get to a festival site, all the stress goes away, and it's like it's kind of like party time. It's not a party. It's like it, we've worked really hard. We've set up all these different parts of the event, and now it's going to take place. As far as troubleshooting goes, I've seen everything. Well, I haven't seen everything. There's always something else I haven't seen, but I feel like I've seen everything, and I know how to act and react. And um, it's mostly about the people that work for me. It's like uh, I've got people who work for me for the last 15, 18 years. I'm a very loyal person and people tend to be loyal back. My production manager's been with me for 22 years and my marketing guy's been with me for 15 years, I think, right now. And my VIP director's been with me for 18 years. Like, it's just like we've been doing this for a long time. We're a family. So it's like we're putting out the family vibes from ourselves as a family. It comes across that way.
Can you talk to me about some of the like intangible personality traits you most admire in people you work with, like aside from loyalty?
Um, People that are just people that are taking their role as like the most important thing in their lives for that weekend. Like they're 100% focused. They they stay in their lane. They do what they do and they do it the best possible way that they can. Uh, and they're kind of they join the family. It's like I mean, I just keep going back to that because it's where I started, so it's hard for me to get away from it. But they're the person is just focused on, like I said, doing their part of it. If they're supposed to kind of steer the ship for the still walkers walking around with the kids trailing behind them in a kids parade, then that's what they're going to do. If they're the security guy working at the gate, they're going to be that guy, and they're just going to focus on that. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah.
And I'd also love to hear you talk about what you feel like are the most important traits that you'd use to describe like the ideal leader of a group or of a event or really of any kind of team.
um, hardworking, patience, vision, making people feel good about what they do, how they do it, and just um, people come in here and put they put their heart and soul into this thing, and when you see it, you got to recognize it. You got to let them know that you see them, and you appreciate them, that what they're doing is a big part of what's going on here. Just kind of gets them pumped up.
What do you feel like is the best business advice or career advice that you've been given that you feel like you've actually followed?
Well, it's just about never giving up. It's like, like people say that being a musician, you have to be willing to put your life into it, because a lot of these musicians, they won't, they might be making $500 a month in their sixth year as a musician. It's like these musicians that are making it had to pay their dues. They had to pay 10 to 15 years. They had to deal with bands falling apart. They had to deal with shows falling apart. They had to deal with being broke. They had to deal with, living in their van. Like that, these, for the most part, musicians have lived that life, and it's the same as a promoter. Like I could have given up. I mean, you know, I've been well off and broke like four different times. I mean, I've been in debt three times in the last 20 years, just completely upside down, and then had to crawl my way back out of it. And the only way to crawl back out of it is like seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, you know, I know what I'm doing. I got relationships with these bands. I can throw a festival. I'm gonna make this thing happen. And so really just have to tell yourself that no matter what happens, you're gonna keep pushing and you're gonna make it.
And a lot of people don't realize like it takes someone with that much courage for these events to go on outside of Live Nation. So Tim, shout
Oh
out
yeah,
to you, man, for going on that journey because there's not a lot of Tims out there putting on these kind of events, and it takes crazy courage in addition to attention to detail and leadership and all of that. And like we were talking about earlier, the scene's kind of in a drought with these types of festival
right,
events, especially ones that aren't by some publicly traded corporation. Um,
sure.
so Tim, from all of us crazy music fans, thank you.
Right on.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for
I
that.
really
And
appreciate it, Cam.
absolutely. And everyone out there listening, like I mentioned, grab your tickets to All Good Now if you're interested. We got a link in the description, June 13th, 14th at Meriwether Post Pavilion. Widespread, Green Sky, Claypool Gold, Dark Star Orchestra, and more. Wrapping up here, Tim, got a final question for you.
All right.
What advice can you share with us about living a life that you can look back on and actually be proud of?
When I started this business, I read two books. I read Bill Graham Presents, and I read Do What You Love, and the Money Will Follow. So I would say exactly that. Like I started out like if I can make a living and be in the music business and be a promoter, that was my goal. My first goal was that. And 30 years later, I can sit back and I can say, I've made a living, and I've lived to everybody's always gotten paid, no matter how much I was getting my ass kicked, people get paid. It's certain things you have to live by, and not canceling a show. Like I don't cancel a show. Bands have canceled on me. I've had to cancel a show because the bands canceled me, but I've never decided from my perspective, whether I'm win, lose, or draw, that I'm going to cancel the show. The show must go
Man,
on.
This is Flowers on the Stage.